good. Okay. So I freaking loved Amnesia is an Asset. I think this is something that is never talked about, which is something that I love that he talks about in chapter 9 of Your Amnesia is an Asset. And he's like, the quote that he started the chapter with is, to be able to forget means sanity. And I think that like that's so true. And one of my favorite parts in this chapter was when he talks about what like he's like, you will fail, but you have to understand that like a pivot is not looking back or dwelling on the future, but it turns boldness into greatness. And he said, sometimes what other people call genius is not a matter of being smarter or more talented than everyone else, but simply being stubborn and persistent enough to keep putting ideas into the world until one of them catches fire. You don't ask a permission or approval from anyone else. Successful people keep pushing because they know if they stop, they lose momentum. In any profession, momentum is everything. You should always be working on the next big idea, the next invention, the next acquisition, the next something. And if you get your hand slapped because you acted too aggressively, so what? And that's on 197 into 198. And I just think it's so true, right? Like, how many times do we not do something because we're afraid like how other people might perceive it too aggressive, or like, oh my gosh, like I just don't know, like I might be too much for somebody or whatever. And I think that this just gave me so much like affirmation and so much confirmation on the idea that like sometimes I'm like, I always get too ahead of myself, or like I'll start to doubt myself. Like, am I thinking like way too many steps ahead? But he just said, like, you should always be doing that. You should always be working on the next big idea. You should always be working on the next something. And he says, even if your choice is wildly successful, you will always find people who resent that you did something other than what they expected of you.
Mm-hmm.
And someone else's discomfort with your bold action is not your problem. And he just also gave confirmation about like doubt is going to seep into even the most confident heart. And I think sometimes we get so hard on ourselves because we know we shouldn't doubt ourselves. And it's like this vicious cycle of like, why am I doubting myself? Oh my gosh, why am I doubting myself? And then you get even more doubt because you're mad that you doubted yourself. Because sometimes when you know more, it's harder because you're like, I should know better. I have higher standards now. Like I shouldn't be doing this. And it's like, no, doubt is going to creep in for everybody, but just keep going in spite of it. You know, do it anyways, do it scared, that whole thing. Tay, what was your favorite part?
I like at the bottom of 199 where he's talking about if it's important to forget about your failures and the self-doubt they breed, it's just as essential to forget about your successes and the overconfidence they create. A wise man once said, winning makes you lazy and stupid, and I couldn't agree more. When you have a great success, the lesson you can take away from it is that you're entitled to it because you're just smarter and more talented than everyone else. But if that's what you remember from your victories, you're more likely to coast on what you think makes you more deserving than others. And I think it's just like, that's just like a good reminder, like every month, like I just have to like think of me like just pretty much starting over. Like we are starting over every month. And, you know, yesterday's victory isn't going to win today's game. And you have to constantly show up and grow and build, and you can't get complacent. You can't think you're entitled. And you have to continue to have that attitude to keep going forward in this business. And I know sometimes it's easy to feel entitled and to feel complacent, and you can't.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the mistakes that I have made is thinking like, when it comes to like pride or like not being humble or whatever, I've made the mistake in the past of thinking that won't happen to me. Like I'm not a prideful person, but like it happens to everybody. And that's like entitled to think that it wouldn't happen to me. You know what I mean? And it's like this odd kind of dynamic of like, I'm just not an entitled person. Well, I'm not, but that doesn't mean it won't happen to me. That doesn't mean that it can't happen to me. Because it will. And so when you know that you are susceptible to having pride jump in the way of you, and you are susceptible of like kind of getting in your ego mixed up in things, like it happens to anybody. It doesn't make you less of a person. It just makes you human. And it's just being able to catch it when you need to. Like catch it before it gets the best of you. I loved on the bottom of 200 when he said, first, believing in your own greatness is a sure way to kill it.
Mhm.
Ego makes you lazy and makes you take shortcuts, which spell doom for any ambitious goal. Second, keep in mind that everything I achieve is due to God working through me, and it's all for his glory.
Mhm.
That keeps me humble because I know that if I fall into the trap of believing my own press clippings, I might lose sight of who I am. So, yes, enjoy the victory lap, just make it a short one. He said, no success is worth distancing yourself from the Lord. I freaking love that. So good.
Yeah, I highlighted that part.
And then I want to go back to 199 real quick at the top. And he said, you can't please others at the expense of doing what you know to be right. You have two primary duties in this world. And I need to remind myself of this consistently. Be a person of honor, character, and morality. And number two, be true to the purpose that God has placed on your heart. And it's like, if you're doing those, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, you know? That was so good. And I think one of the other like gut checks that he said was like, you memories of the past are like glorious and fun, but what happens when you hold on to the memory for too long? And he talks about like if you're living as the person is that like you were in the memory of that, like you can't step into who God really created you to be right now in the present. And he started talking about how that like if you do that, if you live in the memories of the past, it will make your present really dull. And I think this happens so much. Like, I mean, how many times have I said like, and I'm not even like saying it in any type of way to be living in the past, but like like knowingly I was doing that of like, my gosh, like there was so much momentum when we did this, or there was this happening when we did this, or like comparing those feelings and those memories from the past and like trying to recreate them in the future and recognizing that like that's actually making what's going on right now feel dull to me. And that's not what God wants us to do. He doesn't want us to like live in those memories of the past because we always like remember the good stuff and make it feel like it's better than it really was, right? Because in the moment, we still felt, we know that if we really think about it and we're honest with ourselves, we really know that it wasn't as good as we want to remember it to be, right? Like, have you ever done that with a relationship? Like I've done that. I'm like, oh my God, like I just felt this, or this was so strong. And it's not that it wasn't, it just like, it's sabotaging your expectation for the future. So I love when he said that. He said, he wants you to be who you are today to become who you're destined to be. You can't do that if your first words are always remember when. And I was like, dang. Never forget the glory days, but don't try to relive them. Don't dwell on them. Let them be what they are, a shining moment that propels you forward. And then I love how he made the distinction of like what to remember and what not to, and like how to determine what you should like if that like there's no value in holding on to emotional pain and guilt. There's no value in it. Um and and he starts talking about like forgiveness. And so don't forget the lessons, but forget the pain that was associated with it. And this is my own personal take on it, but sometimes I think that people continue to remember the pain because they haven't learned the lesson. And once you learn the lesson, I feel like then you can start to forget the pain because you understand how it falls in the process, like where it falls and you're like, oh, like I get why that had to happen, like I don't want to go back to that. Like, but if you're still feeling the pain, it's because you haven't viewed it as a lesson yet. You haven't really extrapolated like what he was trying to teach you in those moments. And so you keep going back to the pain. That's just like my personal take on it, but that's and he talked about like what you should do, and he went over like what not to forget, but he just talks about like stop reliving like the negative things from those memories. Like it's not serving you, like forget it. If that's this one was really hard like for me to read because I was like, dang, I'm really with that. Number 2 on 204, he said, stop letting your past pass judgment on your present. I was like, dude, I do that to myself all the time. Because he says, what happened in the past might have been a judgment on who you were then, but that was then. You're not the same person. You've grown and moved closer to the full realization of God's destiny for you. And if God finds you worthy, then you are. And it's like, dang, like I've judged myself so much. I'm like, why did I make that dumb mistake? And I'll beat myself up almost to the point where I'll bring that same shame into my next decision. And it's like, dang, like all I was meant what to do with that was just learn from it and move the F on. Like he's not a condemning God. And like I know that, like I actually know that in my brain, but sometimes my brain has to remind my heart of that. And I like forget that piece of it. And then I like number 4 a lot too. And he said, stop thinking you know more than God. Like literally, this is, I want to go live about this because it's so freaking true. Like he says, that's what's the stubborn refusal to forget really is. The assertion that you decide your worth, not God. Well, God has already declared your worth and found you equal to his purpose. So why are you fighting so hard against his judgment? Except that God has already forgotten and forgiven you, and so can you. So I don't know. I just love that because I think so often we're like trying to make that judgment, and we're trying to like determine our worth, like the price on the menu, right? But like God's already decided that the menu was already created. Like we don't have to go back and adjust the price. Like he's already paid it. Like it's already done. We own nothing. And sometimes it's like, dang, like I can move forward feeling so much lighter when I understand that. Okay, let's think. Let's look.
My favorite, just towards the end, is like when he's saying that like you're gonna have setbacks, but they're temporary, and God isn't. And like know
So
the difference between know the difference, and amnesia will become your ally.
So good. I like the advice too he gave about like on 206 of make a list of what not to forget as you move on from venture to venture if it helps. And I think all of us can like get a lot of closure from different points in our lives if we just make that list of like what we don't want to forget moving forward. And I think like I wish I would have done this after like every conference or after every promotion or whatever, because it's like, dang, there's so many things that I wish like I could just remind myself of. I was talking to Connie the other day, and she was just like, I don't like know like why I'm feeling like not how I want to feel. And I said, well, what I want you to do is like when you were feeling really good, like 2 and 3 weeks ago, I really want you to go back and read your journal entries. And like doing that will really help, because sometimes it's like, again, like what we were talking about earlier, like you remember it as so much better than it really was. And yeah, you were feeling good, but it wasn't like you were feeling like high or something. Like you were feeling just good. And so really bringing everything more back, like closer to the middle, and not feeling like your spectrum is so big, like it doesn't have to be that big. So for me, just like understanding like, dang, I need to do that. Like I need to make a list of what I don't want to forget and the things that like I don't want to like make sure that I make those same mistakes again. And I love what he said, like the things you say to yourself. I keep going, I keep progressing, I keep pushing, I keep affirming who I am. I keep creating, I keep writing, I keep directing, I keep teaching, I keep going. I don't let anything that's happened in my past affect my future. I love that. So good. Okay. Chapter 10. What was your favorite part, Tay?
Hold on. So on 215, like when he's talking about you do the thing out of your thing and they will come to you, what he was saying was too often we put too much energy into networking and self-promotion and not enough energy into perfecting our craft. You focus on your passion and become great at it, your work will become so compelling that people will have no choice but to seek you out. And I think just like checking yourself and like, really figuring out like what is it that you're passionate about, not even just within the business, but like with outside the business, and like still portraying that to your following, and having that passion and energy is going to bring people into your business. But like you have to be true to who you are, and like understand who you are, because you have to know how to lead yourself to be able to lead others. And I think just like recognizing that all of that makes a huge difference. And it's not just promoting the business, like it's promoting yourself.
Yes, 100%. I love that. Just like saying like, because I mean, I'm so guilty of that too. I'm like, oh, the marketing has to be great or whatever. And it's like, dang, if I just pour into like what I already have and I get better, like everything around me is going to get better and it's almost going to promote itself, you know? I love because if you think about it, like when we sucked at posting, like when we sucked at making stories, and we were still enrolling hella people.
Right.
So it's just about like, dang, like it really doesn't have, like we're spending so much time on making things like look a certain way or, you know, be perfect because we have this expectation of ourselves, like in self-promotion now and whatever of like, oh, we have these new expectations. And it's like, dang, if I just go back to focusing on like getting better every single day, then like God's going to take care of it because I'm going to be like walking in that purpose. So I love that. I love on 217 when he said, like at the top, he said, the reality is even if you think no one pays attention to you or you're invisible to the powers that be, you really aren't. You should behave as though people are watching because they are. This means you're doing your best work at all times. And of course, but it's deeper than that. You also need to be who you say you are. Be true to the values that you claim to honor and stay committed to the purpose that God is calling you to. You never know upon whom your works, words, or actions will make an impact. Word gets around. I love that. I think like, so we just forget like such little things like that. And he said, nobody will send you a memo telling you they're coming, but huge opportunities could be riding on what someone thinks of you, your skills and your character. And it's like when God like decides to promote you, Michael Todd talks about this a lot, but like when God decides to promote you, it can happen overnight. And he was saying like how like he like worked under the radar for so long, and then like one time somebody put a YouTube video about relationship goals, and you guys have probably seen it, and then he blew up like legitimately overnight. But had he not gone through those processes and like been true to his character, then like he wouldn't have been able to have the success that he had. And I just think it's so interesting because you really do, you never know who's watching. And
I
just
just love
good reminders. You know, I think we talk about this a lot anyways, like just about like integrity and like he says, I love when he says, and it doesn't just show up as part of a presentation. It's not convincing someone to think about you in a certain way. Integrity is who you are. It's how you live. And he just reminds us like, be a person of honor, even if you don't think anyone will notice.
I just love like the Bible verse he quotes on 2:18. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. And
good.
I think that just goes back to like I've always said, like God will never give you a team that you can't lead. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to put people in your line of vision if you can't lead yourself and you can't show up for them. Like why would he put people in your path if you're not mentally in the place to lead them and to help them be successful? Like he wouldn't do that to other people. And so just like checking yourself and making sure your mind's right and your heart's right and you're in a place to lead, and he'll put those people in your line of vision. And even customers, like I know the months that I slacked taking care of my customers, like it was almost every month after that, I wasn't signing a lot of customers. And it was probably because God was like, well, you're not even taking care of the customers I'm giving you. Why would I bless you with more? And like, I have to check myself on that regularly because I know that's how it works.
Yeah, 100%. I love what he said too. Like your reputation is like your agent. What is it going to say about you when you're not in the room? And I was like, dang, so true. So true. And then obviously my favorite part is just when he was talking about it's time to move, man. It's just time to move. Like God only does his part when you do yours, and sometimes that means doing more than showing up as your best self. Sometimes part of cultivating your purpose and passion means you must put yourself in the physical environment where the action in your field is happening. Faith without works is dead. But often I find people are crippled by fear of leaving the place they live in order to chase their dreams. You can't just dream about what you want. You have to wake up and go after it based on faith. There might be a certain thing that God can't do for you while you stay in the place where you grew up. Oftentimes, doing what God has put in your heart requires a mighty move of faith, literally. And he talks about just moving in general and um, having that urge. And he said, if you trust God and you feel it's time to move, heed that feeling, even in the face of lingering doubts. There are certain things you won't get absolute confirmation on until you're in the environment that you're called to be in. Let's see what else I highlighted.
Ooh, on 228, he was saying most people end up living lives that are smaller than what they're capable of because they never have enough faith to follow what God tells them through the Holy Spirit. Fear takes hold, fear that a risk won't pay off, or fear that we'll be laughed at and humiliated for doing something that appears to make no sense. In order to take that risk and make that move, we need to understand this. Making a life-changing choice based on God's word is the most rational thing we can ever do.
It's so good.
And like trusting that God is going to be an unseen mover in our lives, and things are always going to fall into place when you like put faith first. He's talking about that.
Mm-hmm. I love when he said acting on faith is a habit forming process. Once you do it and it works, the more you keep doing it. And like you just like kind of build up that faith based on that. And the more you'll trust yourself in God, but it is like a habit forming process. It doesn't just happen. And I love that. And then in the epilogue, did you guys read that?
Yeah.
And at the end, it just like gave me chills when I was reading it. He said, someone asked me what it takes to make it in Hollywood. I think they thought I was going to say talent, passion, a dream, or something like that. But I replied, you need a mirror, a Kleenex, and a box of Band-Aids. And that's true whether you're in Hollywood or not. You need a mirror because things will get difficult and you'll be tempted to change who you are. The mirror will remind you of who you are and why you got into whatever business you're in. The Kleenex because you're going to cry. There will be nights that you'll be on your knees sobbing because you don't think that your dream is ever going to happen. You will get passed over for opportunities. You'll be frustrated and you will want to quit. And finally, you need Band-Aids because you're going to get hurt. People will talk about you, betray you, and even lie to you. So you've got to be tough. When you get hurt, you slap a bandage on, you keep going, all the while remaining exactly who God created you to be. You will make it. I'm getting chills reading it again. I have faith in you. God has faith in you. Everything you're going through now has a purpose and is part of the journey that God designed for you. As long as you remain true to who you are and make serving his purpose your real marker of success, you can't go wrong. I'll close with both a word of a parting that means a great deal to me, and I'm feeling, and I hope God will grant you everything that you do.
Amen.
So good. And I love when he was just talking about like peace. You know, and he says like the compass is God. Like check back in with your purpose every day. Like, are you pursuing what you want or what God wants for you? Are you being true to that person? Right? Like just checking back in every single day in prayer, but like also an honest like self-reflection, right? And by doing that, like you'll be aware and be honest to yourself. And you'll find that peace because it's like he says, it's hard to come by. So you have to do it, you know, with Jesus.
I absolutely love just like the ending reader's guide. Like some of those questions are really deep, and those are some of the things that I want to start journaling. Just looking at it, some of those questions, I'm like, dang, I want to like reflect on that. So I want to use some of those questions in my daily
Yes,
journaling. I'm doing that.
love that. Such a good idea.
Those are good questions.
Yeah, so good. So good, so good. Okay, is there anything else you guys want to chat about?
I don't think
Oh, this
so.
was a good book. This was so good to read like on the heels of Relentless because they have the same thing. It just kind of like guided you back. Because I think in Relentless, like it's such a good book, but it can almost make you feel like you have to be like
A cleaner.
outside of yourself. Like and I think this kind of brings us back to like we don't have to be outside of ourselves, but we just have to kind of get tougher. Like you said, like those band-aids, get the Kleenex out, like whatever. And you have to be relentless, but still be true and check back within God. Like but check back with God about like how your character is and just being true to that. So I loved it.
Oh yeah, that's good.